and our guests. And I just want to mention for our guests, if you, we're happy to have you to witness this. I assume it appears that Bakari probably invited you in, so that's great. We just ask you to go ahead and continue to mute and keep your cameras off during this next period. But this is obviously an important point in Bakari's process of working toward his PhD, and so we're happy to be together for this event. And Bakari, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to go ahead and share your screen, share your document, and walk through your presentation.
Very good. 1 second. All right.
We're seeing it now, Bakari.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. And so today I will be presenting my dissertation defense presented to the faculty of the Gladys W. and David H. Patton College of Education of Ohio University in partial fulfillment of the requirements for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. My study, titled On Intersectional Ground, Examining the Efficacy of Black Culture Centers in the Age of Intersectionality. Before we begin, I always like to share some of the wisdom of our ancestors. And that comes from, of course, one of the greatest ancestors that we have, Fannie Lou Hamer, who taught us to never forget where you come from and always praise the bridges that carried you over. And one of those bridges I want to acknowledge is Duty Bookman, Cecil Fateman, Toussaint L'Ouverture, Victoria Montu, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and Marie-Jeanne Lademanière, who bravely fought to free themselves and their Haitian compatriots from the dehumanizing vicissitudes of chattel enslavement and French colonial rule 233 years ago. I thank them for their valor, courage, adaptive vitality, ingenuity, and unwillingness to acquiesce their humanity and Africanity. Their victory and sacrifice achieved at a terrible price in the face of overwhelming odds became the animating spirit of African resistance in the Western world, what we now know and call Pan-Africanism.
Hey, Bakari, I'm going to stop you for just a second because we're still just looking at your first slide.
Okay.
So there we go.
Are you able to see the slide now?
Yeah, we can see it.
I also want to take this time to express my solidarity with the people of Haiti and Haitian immigrants in Ohio. This is of particular importance for me as an African American, as a long time ago, when it mattered most, Haitians stood in solidarity with us. I also want to state with all the conviction that my soul can muster that the prejudice against Haitian people is not based on what they eat, but who they beat 220 years ago.
Mm.
With that said, I want to share with you all that I am not crazy. I am simply eccentric. So we're going to, of course, get into the outline of my defense. We're going to look at the background of the study. We're going to review Black students' experiences at historically white institutions. We're going to look at the purpose of the study. We're going to also look at the definition of success, also look at the research questions, the significance of the study, and we're going to examine the contemporary challenges that Black culture centers face today. We're also going to examine the racing of space. We are familiar with Charles Mill's work, the racial contract, and of course, we're looking at what I'll call the cultural contract in higher education. We're also going to examine the conceptual framework of the study, which is freedom as maroonage. We would then, of course, explore the site where this study was done, review the methodological approach, which includes data collection and data analysis. We, of course, will take time to examine and take a look at the limitations of the study, the findings of the study, and of course, last but not least, implications. Then we open things up for questions. So, background of the study. During the 1960s, many predominantly white institutions began to integrate, leading to a large phalanx of Black students coming to campus. Many in the civil rights community believe that this was a watershed moment regarding educational equality for Black collegians. I argue that the influx of Black students was due to white interest convergence, rooted in compelling Black athletes to compete at their various institutions to overcome athletic setbacks on the hardwood and gridiron. These athletic setbacks I'm referring to, many of you may be aware, 1966 NCAA basketball championship, University of Texas Western, now known as UTEP, University of Texas El Paso, defeated the all-white University of Kentucky team, which of course was coached by Adolph Rupp. Also in 1971, September 10th, 1971, the racially integrated University of Southern California football team marched into Legion Field in Birmingham, Alabama, and defeated Bear Bryant's all-white Alabama Crimson Tide team by a score of 42-21, with star running back Sam Cunningham rushing for 135 yards on only 11 carries with 3 touchdowns. This led white institutions to begin to recruit, of course, Black students to attend their campuses. So I argue that the reason was not due to a watershed civil rights moment or even a come to Jesus moment, but due to interest convergence. However, when students came to campus, they found themselves in hostile environments in which they faced anti-Black racism, stereotyping, racial microaggressions from students, faculty, and staff, as well as physical and psychic assaults, racial theme parties, campus police harassment and misconduct, defensive thinking, and the feelings of isolation that led to racial battle fatigue. These issues will lead to the creation of the Black student movement and the creation of Black studies as an academic discipline at San Francisco State College, now San Francisco State University, and the creation and proliferation of Black culture centers at institutions throughout the country. The purpose of the study was to examine the role Black culture centers play in creating Black solidarity, student success, and a home away from home in the intersectional era at a historically white institution. The examination of what success looks like for Black students who engage the Black culture center at a historically white institution. So defining success in this study, success was defined in the study as the ability to matriculate through and graduate from a historically white institution with a competitive GPA of 3.0 or higher, develop relationships with institutional agents that are invested in their success, and have a clear plan of what their goals and aspirations are personally, academically, and professionally when they leave campus. This is of particular importance to me based on my experience as an undergraduate who engaged with the Black Culture Center at a historically white institution. Also, in defining success, we wanted to, of course, examine this concept of belief that competition is a byproduct of individualism and capitalism. This was something that, of course, was articulated at an institution that will remain nameless to Black students. I make the argument that the premise that competition is an aspect of whiteness contributes to Black students' academic remissness. This remissness, in my opinion, is a byproduct of the soft bigotry of low expectations in which Black people, ignorant of their history, heritage, and culture, engage in a level of racial essentialism. As we know, African people, independent of European and Arab influence, created empires in which they fought, invaded, and dragooned non-African peoples while leading and influencing transcontinental trade from antiquity to the Middle Ages. Research questions. How do students envision their relationship with the center, shaping their identity and future place in an anti-Black society? Distance. What led participants to seek the Black Culture Center as a psychosocial decolonial counterspace on campus? Movement. How do participants describe the Black Culture Center as a space of belonging and resistance on campus? Property. How do participants in the intersectional era make meaning of the Black Culture Center as a site of community building and solidarity? Purpose. Now we're going to take a look at the significance of the study. Since Black Culture Center's inception, they have faced challenges to their mission, programming, and existence via accusations of promoting racial balkanization and a separatist agenda. According to Hefner, at the turn of the 21st century, Black culture centers were on shaky ground due to the influx of an increasingly diverse student population, a dearth of financial resources, and the emphasis on social programs instead of academic programs. Patton argued that Black culture centers are on solid ground. highlighting that Black Culture Centers benefit Black students and the overall campus by assisting students in creating Black support systems that construct positive self and group identity, but also providing avenues that allow students to feel empowered vis-a-vis involvement in campus life, success in the classroom, and intellectual growth. I argue that Black cultures are now on intersectional ground. As we know, intersectionality is a critical theory mainstay that has its origins in the Black feminist discourse, namely the brilliant work of Kimberly Crenshaw. I opine or posit in my study that this turn towards intersectionality has arguably created a fragmented response to racialized oppression and Black community building on and off campus. For example, in some circles, gender, sexual orientation, age, and even religion have taken precedence over combating anti-Black racism and white supremacy. These fragmented responses can have a detrimental effect on Black culture centers remaining a center of Black student activity, thought, and community building on campus. Also, in terms of the significance of the study, and I appreciate my committee for helping me with this, the anti-woke agenda. We're all familiar with Governor DeSantis in Florida. We know that lawmakers in Florida, Texas, Ohio, and a number of states have passed bills to dismantle their public higher education institutions' diversity, equity, and inclusion offices, right? University of Arkansas launched a preemptive strike against right-wing DEI initiatives. Some argue it was a defensive flight of hand that called for DEI efforts to be decentralized, right? However, this move puts Black culture centers in a bind, right? Where now students may not have a space, a decolonial space of identity and resistance to, of course, the isolating Eurocentric behavioral expectations and materiality of historically white institutions' campus ecology. So now we're going to turn to what I believe is the bread and butter of my study, the racing of space. So Charles Mills, his work, The Racial Contract, he argues provides the basis of a society that is made up of free and equal individuals, as intimated in the U.S. Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and other foundational American preambles, but rather a partitioned social ontology divided between persons and racial subpersons. Black culture centers, I believe, are situated in the racial contract due to what Mills calls the racing of space. The racing of space is defined as a depiction of space as dominated by individuals, whether persons or subpersons, of a certain race. I argue that Black culture centers challenge the racial contract of higher education in three distinct ways: epistemologically, ideologically, and spatially. Epistemological challenge. Epistemologically, Black culture centers counter the supposition of the racial contract via the belief that whiteness serves as the locus of civil society, that infers that non-white peoples were devoid of history, culture, and civilization prior to their categorization by Europeans. For example, according to Asante, Black culture centers address the psychosocial, cultural, spiritual, and intellectual barriers that Black students must confront on campus due to historically white institutions being akin to white culture centers, in which physical monuments are present to celebrate whiteness as the paragon of humanity, ethics, and the pursuit of scholastic and intellectual achievement. Thus, Black culture centers serve as an oasis in a desert of whiteness to combat the visually violent and oppressive representations of humanity in education that exclude non-whites. The ideological challenge. Black culture centers counter the ideological conditioning of the racial contract that seeks to envelop the victims of the contract into willing participants and defenders of its cause. This conditioning, according to Mills, is a depersonalizing apparatus through which whites learn to see non-whites and whites learn to see themselves, with the goal of non-white subjugation, self-loathing, and racial deference to whites. Black culture centers serve as a decolonizing counterspace in which programming centers the scholarship of radical Black educators and activists such as Frederick Douglass, Carter G. Woodson, Anna Julia Cooper, and Ngugi wa Thiong'o that highlight and provide perspective elixirs to the anti-Black culture bomb Black students face at historically white institutions. In the spatial challenge, Black culture centers serve as a decolonizing counterspace as the racial contract links space with race and race with personhood, reserving privileged spaces for first-class citizens, e.g. whites. This claiming of space, while symbolic and substantial in nature, symbolic as Black cultures are part of a historically white institution, substantial due to their creation being born of Black agency and self-determination, serves as an assertion of the full personhood of African peoples via the abrogation of white-centered colonialism and the institutionalized disincarnate views of African people that derive from it. So once again, the challenge, epistemological, ideological, and spatial challenge to the racial contract, or what we call the cultural contract of higher education. We're going to move forward with the conceptual framework of the study, freedom as maroonage. Maroonage is a concept that reflects the practice of African flight, also known as Sankofa, or the intention of becoming free. This concept was birthed during the crucible of anti-Black oppression, the Holocaust of enslavement, in which enslaved Africans and their descendants refused to acquiesce to the vicissitudes of chattel enslavement and the death, decadence, and dysphoria of a Black existence in the New World. Flight can be both real and imagined, and freedom is not a place, but a state of being. During the Holocaust of enslavement, enslaved Africans and their descendants believed that when they died, when they transitioned to the ancestral realm, their spirit would return to Africa. So we see Africa playing a role as a space of freedom, right? Not only in terms of from a spiritual standpoint, but also from a cultural ideological standpoint as well. And the maroonage consists of 4 pillars: distance, movement, property, and purpose. Site selection. To be selected for the study, the Black Culture Center must have been established during the late 1960s during the social struggle of the 60s and have a physical space on campus large enough to be an actual center. Some institutions have Black Culture Centers that are nestled in a single room or office space. One institution did not participate due to staffing and programming changes. A second center did not participate because the Black Culture Center was not created during the social struggle of the 60s. The site selected was the Howard A. Mims African American Culture Center at Cleveland State University in Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland State University is a public research university founded in 1964, located in the heart of downtown Cleveland. Cleveland State's undergraduate enrollment is nearly 10,000. Black students make up 18% of the total undergraduate population. The Mims Center opened 54 years ago as the Afro-American Cultural Center at Cleveland State University on November 10th, 1970, under the leadership of Dr. Edward Isabor. The center opened to enhance opportunities for community and campus collaboration and student engagement, while also sponsoring exhibits and talks highlighting African American history, politics, art, and writing. The mission of the Howard A. Mims African American Culture Center is to serve as a support arm for the Department of Africana Studies at Cleveland State University. Program is conducted with the mission of educating and increasing student staff, faculty, and community knowledge and appreciation of African American, and African diaspora culture. Methodological approach. Case study was used in this qualitative research because it allows the researcher to study a bounded system, in this case, of course, the Black Culture Center, which can be an individual, specific program or process, an institutional relationship. We also utilize a critical case study methodology, which allowed the study to focus to center on power relations, thus exposing the forces of hegemony and injustice by interrogating how Black students overcome the power gap that is omnipresent in society and reinforced on campus. Data collection was three-pronged and had a three-pronged approach: interviews, 12 semi-structured 1-hour interviews with Black identified students, historical document research, archival research done at Cleveland State University's archives, located on the 3rd floor of the Michael Schwartz Library, and observation, programs, meetings, and events at the Mims Center and related spaces on campus. These events honoring Black women's contribution to the 1963 March on Washington, Ujima writing workshops, and Sankofa movie night, hidden figures, and of course, Black Student Union meeting. Data analysis. Utilize software RI, a computer-based software tool for qualitative analysis. Open coding. Utilize open coding, in which codes were written in the margins that derived from the data. Then move to using axle coding to derive larger things from open coding by combing through each interview, making notes of things and responses from participants This process yielded 3 themes used to categorize the data. Lastly, I utilized theoretical coding, in which the 4th theme was shaped and informed from concepts and phenomena gleaned from the conceptual framework of the study, freedom as maroonage. Also, in terms of limitations, a long study would have provided a more extensive data set, allowing more observation and document analysis. Moreover, including more institutions likely would have provided more diversity of thought in the study. Black cultures in different parts of the country may have provided a different perspective regarding what it means to be Black at a historically run institution, while the role of Black cultures play in fomenting Black student success on campus. So now we're going to turn to the findings. So these are 4 things that we found, of course, in the data: campus climate perception, students' perceptions of campus climate, the initial perception students had, of course, of the Howard A. Mims Center, the focus on it, the people, the staff made the difference. And of course, we examined on intersectional ground, and then, of course, last but not least, freedom as maroonage. In respect for time, we're going to focus particularly on freedom as maroonage. And so, of course, we talked about those 4 concepts of maroonage: distance, movement, property, and, of course, purpose. Distance being a spatial quality separating the individuals, the current location or condition from a future location or condition. Students described how the Mims Center served as a medium that supported students' progression socially, intellectually, racially, culturally, and professionally at Cleveland State University. For example, Maya shared how the Mims Center has provided a home away from home at Cleveland State that contributes to her journey as a young adult and Black collegian who hopes to use her education to give back to the community. Shanti, a biracial student, expressed how the Mims Center has helped her gravitate toward having a Black identity due to the center's program in cultivating a sense of connection in its dual role as the Department of Africana Studies office. Movement, the ability of participants to have control over motion and the intended directions of their actions. Participants discussed their personal experiences at the Mims Center. It became abundantly clear that their time at the center and interactions with staff facilitated a multifaceted sense of direction. For example, Naomi, a student worker at the Mims Center, shared how learning the history of how the Mims Center was created and its programming regarding professional development has helped her develop a level of critical consciousness. She shared, "I like the workshop, Umoja Roundtable, where we learned the struggles and even the process of the Mims Center becoming a center. It was like, oh, I didn't even realize how much of a fight they had to go through. I feel like it made me realize the real world where even though I'm going to have all these credentials, I'm going to have a double major, my race can still have an impact on if I get hired or not. It's still like in the back of my head. That's why I feel like I wanted to make the most out of my college experience, and it will give me a competitive advantage when I graduate." Property, the designation of a physical, legal, and material object that is under the possession and ownership of an individual, institution, or state. Participants often discuss the Mims Center on campus in terms of feeling ownership of the center, as it was their space and place on campus. Moreover, participants commented on the role that the center's ecology played in helping create a sense of collective and historical accomplishment and a political apparatus of self-appreciation, also known as self-respect and self-determination. Darius, for example, shared the role the center has in helping students develop a politics and self-appreciation. He commented, "One thing I can say about coming here is that we all have a sense of respect and hold each other accountable. Because I know Miss Simmons at the front desk, she makes sure nobody uses profanity here. This is not a space for us to do that, because this is a space of respectability. Because I would hear people younger than me, they'd be cursing up a storm, saying the N-word and all of that. But here, when you come in here, and that is heard, we hold everyone accountable. Like we say something and be like, hey, listen, you can't say that type of stuff in here. To me, this is a space of self-respectability. Because when I come here, I'm in a space that removes me from a lot of negativity that is embraced by our community." Purpose, the rationale, reasons for, and goal of an act begun by an individual or social collective. Participants shared how the Mims Center influences their rationale, reasoning, and the goals at Cleveland State University in their personal and professional lives. Shanti commented on how the Mims Center provided a common ground that allowed her to learn about her history, rooted in positive coping mechanisms to anti-Blackness on campus, empowerment and knowledge, as opposed to negative coping mechanisms such as trauma bonding. Jelani shared how the MEM Center staff encourages students to excel academically by normalizing a cultural expectation of academic excellence. He commented, "They push us to be better academically. They always stress academics first. They want to be our main focus. They don't want us to put it on the back burner. That makes it feel like they really, truly want to see us succeed. And they are not just saying it, they're showing that they do. And they have programming to help us succeed academically, like the writing workshop. So it makes me, in a sense, feel that I can succeed because they believe in me." Findings. 6 findings. Black culturists play roles for Black students at historically white institutions, play many roles. Among them are a culturally centered social, political, and academic decolonial counterspace, a home away from home, a space in which students can be their unapologetic selves, and a place of employment. 2, Black culture students contribute to Black student success as they serve as a co-curricular space that emphasizes academic professional development programming. These programs, such as Umoja Roundtable events and Kucha Shakalia study groups, help counter the issues Black students often face at historically white institutions, such as stereotype threat and imposter syndrome, to name a few. Furthermore, these programs address the lack of academic scaffolding in the secondary educational institutions that many Black students attend. Black staff are the front door of the center. Black Culture Center staff play a pivotal role in how students view and perceive the Black Culture Center on campus. For example, positive, meaningful, and supportive interactions with staff contribute to the amount of time and engagement students have with center programming and initiatives. For Black culturists, provide students with a sense of identity, purpose, and direction. They also serve as a conduit for students to learn about their history and culture. Furthermore, students use the Black Culture Center instead of other facilities on campus due to the center's social, cultural, and political environment. One example would be the library. Many students chose to study and do research in the center rather than the library. Of course, last but not least, ecology matters. The physical settings, proxemics, and homophily of the center affect the atmosphere and behavior of Black students as they feel they are part of a legacy of accomplishment and heightened self-respect as people of African descent. Despite the Black Culture Center's existence, several Black students were unaware of it. Some of the reasons for this are the center's location, students fighting other affiliations, Greek life, athletics, and a lack of awareness of their Black identity due to their cultural upbringing. And last but not least, implications. Institutions that have Black culture centers. One of the implications would be understanding that institutions that have Black culture centers are one governor away from Black culture centers no longer existing. So that is something, of course, to be cognizant of. Implications for student affairs practitioners is rather important, is that for staff, the most important thing to do is to treat the students' needs as wholly. For students, be active on campus, to engage in, of course, that Black radical tradition of activism, to actually make sure that the centers remain on campus. One of the issues we found in this study was students became more concerned with the center when they found out that there was a chance that the center would no longer exist because of the anti-woke agenda. And of course, implications for future research, numerous implications for future research. Some of that could even focus on the role, of course, that Black culture centers play in helping develop other students' sense of self, right? We know there's a large amount of literature on the role Black culture centers play for Black students, but what about in terms of relation to other students of color and even white students that frequent the center? And then, of course, there's the bibliography, and of course, we will open things up for questions.
Thank you, Bakari. You can stop sharing. There you go. And I want to, again, just welcome our guests. And this is just remind everybody, this is a time for the committee to engage with Bakari. The committee has received and read the dissertation draft. It's 238 pages, so that was a summary of the draft that the committee has already had access to. So I just want to open up and start and see if anybody has any general comments before we get into a chapter by chapter review. As I say, general comments or questions, and we just ask for all the non-committee members to keep their cameras off during this time.
Well, Bakari, I will say that I like this project very much, and I know that, you know, as you yourself recognize, there's a lot of potential there in expanding the empirical research. Of course, I'm destined to like a project like this because their first couple of chapters sounded like a political theorist, which warms the cockles of my heart. And I have some questions about that when we get to the individual chapter comments. But overall, I think it has a ton of potential. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of the work that sort of locates freedom as maroonage in this sort of set of institutional questions that are very contemporary. So, you know, by way of setting the tone, I like what you're up to here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other general comments or questions for Bakari?
You know, I would just echo Julie's comments. As I expected, it was not the same old thing. You really can feel your voice in the writing, which I appreciate and love. I also think like just the emphasis on Cleveland and the community, without even saying it so much, you really broke that silo between kind of this gated ivory tower, higher ed kind of idea and the community in which it's located. So I really appreciated that as well. There are places where I was like, elaborate, say more. And there are places where I was like, maybe less. So I've indicated a lot of that in text and, you know, can talk about that when we go chapter through chapter. But overall, I really appreciated it too. And just the creativity, the quotes, you know, again, you could really feel your particular voice in it, which I think really strengthened the work.
Great, thanks. And judging by your nonverbals, Dr. Graves, I think you're ready to move into the chapter by chapter. Okay, great. So, well, chapter one, and I just say, Bakari did make some changes in the, you know, from the proposal meeting, kind of focusing the questions and addressing the anti-DEI environment. And there were, I'm sure, some other things as well in terms of the writing and so forth, but those were a couple of the major things I think that he addressed in after the proposal. But just in chapter one, are there comments or questions that people have? Yep, go ahead, Dr. Graves.
Good morning, Bakari. Good job with this. And I'm going to go Professor Mather's statement on the anti-DEI initiative you were talking about. So since your study is situated within Ohio,
Yes.
Okay, I was wondering what your thoughts were about Senate Bill 83. Like, I know you didn't go into a lot of detail on your specific thoughts. I know that's more discussion based, but I want to talk about that. You this in Ohio, all this whole study of yours, you put all this time in it. You interviewed all these folks, Black culture centers, and with Senate Bill 83, which they should have the votes this year to get that passed.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on this? Do you think? I'm putting it out there to you because you're in Ohio. This Ohio study, Senate Bill 83 is there saying we getting rid of all of this, and it's going to be based on University of Kentucky, where I graduated from. They just got rid of all their DEI initiatives last month. University of Nebraska just fired their vice provost for diversity, I think this month. And, North Carolina did the same. They fired all their folks. Texas fired all their folks. All that kind of thing. OSU is about to do the same. They have a vice provost for diversity inclusion, and they haven't filled that position. They got, once James Moore was kind of pushed out, that position is still open. It's been open for like 2 years now, So what's going to happen in Ohio, Bakari, about Senate Bill 83? What you thinking?
Yeah, so I think that's a great point. I think I kind of touched on this in the dissertation that there needs to be a move, right? And it's a rather audacious position that I've taken to move Black cultures to being not on campus, but adjacent to campus.
Oh, I read that, like the Hillel Center.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
saw that. Expand,
Yes.
like, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
and so one, it provides freedom from university bureaucracy and the political machinations of course, ultra conservative bureaucrats. The other issue, but it puts the onus on, of course, the Black community to fund these institutions, right? A greater, and this isn't just me theorizing. This is something that has taken place at Purdue University. They have a standalone Black Culture Center, beautiful center, 3-story tall building, and the Black community said, we want our students to have a Black Culture Center. The university said, we need $3 million. If you raise $2 million, we'll provide the other $1 million.
Okay.
Right. So that is an example that this is something that can come to fruition. It's been done before. But I would argue that that's the direction that Black culture centers are going to need to go in higher education, to being standalone centers or institutions that are adjacent to campus, but not on campus.
Sounds good. Okay. So I want to get your thoughts on that, because I read the Hillel Center part and I said, okay, he thinking out that move, but okay, sound good. And I got some more different chapters, but thank you for that answer. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And then anybody else? Dr. Harrison, Dr. White.
Is page 23 in chapter 1? I think it is.
Yes.
Because I wrote my comments by page number. I was just, we can revisit this later, but I just wanted to flag a little bit of concern about this idea that competition is resisting competition is equivalent to soft bigotry.
Okay.
And yeah, and I think part of why what might be useful to think through is that the first of all, the impulse to compete versus collaborate or cooperate probably has to be deeply historicized, right? Later on, you talk about Black crit resisting neoliberalism,
Yes.
but it seems to me that like neoliberalism is about individualism and competition. And here you seem to be saying we need to embrace individualism and competition.
Right.
So, I mean, I think there are a range of ways to navigate that, but I just wanted to flag it because you took a very clear stance about this. My very old dog is in the background and he's the one that's breathing hard, not me. And so I think that that's worth piecing together. Like the problem is to encourage one population not to embrace competition if the only way to survive in the culture you live in is to compete, right? Like, so historicizing the claim rather than going back and saying culturally, there are similar commitments that have manifest to explain the success of Black cultures. I think I would tend to say that question is one that is always one that has to be historically located. And so that would be my only comment on chapter 1.
Okay. And I understand that. And I think I touched on a little bit, but I can understand where you're going in terms of taking a historical standpoint rather than just a cultural standpoint. But I did mention, if I remember correctly, that part of the issue is, and I talked about that experience when I took a law school course. And the Black students shared that they were being told, don't worry about, getting a good grade, so on and so forth. But law school is notorious for being uber competitive, right? And so what is really taking place and what's going on here? Also, part of, my own personal experience, students as an undergraduate, not focusing on what their grades, right? Not focusing on what excelling, they would graduate what some would call an uncompetitive GPA. And then they would take issue with why they were struggling to get into graduate school, right?
Right.
So in terms of if you want to accomplish particular goals, there are things that you're going to need to do that is rooted in this concept and idea of competition.
And to your point, and this might be something to drive home on law school, because we have a lot of poli-sci students who go on to law school. It turns out that the LSAT is not a good indicator of how you will perform in law school, and grades in law school are not a good indicator of how well you will do in the legal profession. So then we got to ask, like, why are those things being emphasized? And it may have much more to do with, white privilege than anything else. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So things to think about.
And, you know, I
Thank
think
you.
related, just
go
while we're
ahead.
while we're in chapter 1, again, I love your passionate use of language. You call things apocryphal. You talk about the teaching in higher ed of whiteness as human and blackness as subhuman. But sometimes you throw these things in without a lot of context. So, like, I think I would not at all want you to temper the language or, you know, take the edge off it. But I think sometimes these things do need more context, especially in chapter 1, where it's kind of the first time these terms or ideas are being used. So just take the time to flesh it out. And then to Julie's point, maybe, you know, that example you gave about law school, that might be something to address in your positionality or reflexivity statement too, that, you know, your observation here comes from experience around this tension between wanting to interrogate the whiteness of hypercompetitiveness while at the same time succeed in a system where that is the standard. And again, I think all these things are great. I just would elaborate and give more context, especially the first time you bring up an idea that might require more elaboration or context.
Great. Anything else on chapter 1? We will move to chapter 2. I think, Julie, you said did you say you had some comments? What's the page range of chapter 2?
I don't know. I got so sucked in by your writing that sometimes I didn't write my page numbers down. But yeah, I would love to see in the Black crit versus CRT. Is that in chapter 2?
Yes.
I'd just love to see more elaboration about the way Black crit is in tension with neoliberalism, because you say that outright. And I just want to hear you say a little bit more, because you are absolutely on the mark that most of us, at least white people in academics, know CRT, but we don't know Black crit. So I love this as a moment for a more expansive conversation about how you distinguish the two. And especially in relationship to the earlier claim about competition and individualism. So that's a call for more, not a criticism of what's there.
Great. Yeah, Laura, I saw you unmute.
So my chapter 2 stuff is mostly, you've got some really long paragraphs, some really long, you know, areas that just need a little bit more structure and tightening up. So I think the written comments are all clear there, and then just kind of a summary and conclusion. That's all I had for chapter 2.
Okay, Dr. Graves, do you have anything on chapter 2? Okay. All right, so chapter 3 is the method. And what comments do we have on the method?
Dr. Graves.
So
sorry.
This is this discipline specific comment. I know, you know, I'm a psychologist and folks in higher education. So, and most times, Bakari, when in the psych area, because everything has to just be confidential. You know what I mean? You know, that kind of thing. And I just wondered from a practical standpoint, do you think it's beneficial to name the MIM center versus giving it a pseudonym when you're doing this research as far as identifiability? Because in some of the statements you made, I'll give you an example. During one of the interviews, the quotes, you mentioned someone was saying they really didn't want to go to the university.
Right.
They wanted to go to HBCU since they grew up, but it was a full ride. And I tell students the same thing. You get a free ride here, it's no use taking out $200,000 loan going somewhere else, right? So I was thinking about identifiability. If somebody from Cleveland State read this, they think, oh, she didn't want to be here, and you know, we funding her, and you know, I'm just, you know, I always think of those kind of things. And I know, and I hope I don't offend anybody, a lot of academics think they come from the most pure place, but I see retaliation all the time in higher education. And so I'm just thinking about that. What's your thoughts on the identification?
I think that's a good point. I did use pseudonyms for all the students. So that was a way to, you know, protect them, so no one knows who they are, right? And the pseudonyms I used were nowhere close to what the students' actual names were. So that was a way, of course, of addressing that.
Sounds good. Sounds good. But you see what I was saying? That's why I was thinking like, oh, I read this detail. You know, did you want to use Milton Center versus I don't know, Bakari Center? You know what I'm saying? Grave Center, something like that. So that's what I had. But that's discipline specific. So you know what I mean? I defer to the higher education folk here.
You have to keep your camera off, Chris. Okay.
I had the same question in chapter 1 with Cleveland State, but it also seems like so much of your data is very context specific, and I can see how that would be a difficult tension to resolve, and I don't know how identifiable that particular student is, but it is something to think about.
Thanks. Other chapter 3 comments?
I don't know where page 93 and 94 are. Is that 3 or 4?
I think that's 4.
Well, was it about the method? Do you remember?
It's one of the quotes. It's just, you have some great quotes in this, but about the air that you breathe being different in the BCC than in the business school. So I liked the method is working to help you identify actual quotes that illuminate what you're trying to do with freedom as maroonage.
I guess, that's certainly in I think it's in chapter 5, actually. Yeah. So, so it sounds like the committee's pretty quiet on the way that the methods are described. And then chapter 4 is basically a description of the context and the center. So, and that's a short chapter. And then any comments about 4? Okay, and then the meat. When I think of the meat is in chapter 5 with the findings, and that's where the quotes and so forth are. So, any comments there or questions?
Go ahead,
Dr. Graves. You want to go ahead?
My hand wasn't up first. I think Laura was talking first. She beat me to it. Yeah, she was before me.
Okay.
all right, that's cool. And I did have a little bit of a comment on chapter 4, just because we don't normally do chapters 4, 5, and 6. That I wonder if you want to have a little explanation about like why the site context is so important. Okay. And it's just a little bit of a difference. You and your chair can decide on that, but it did take me aback a minute. I was like, oh wait, am I in the right chapter?
Right.
So that's just a thought for you two to consider. In terms of chapter 5, I agree there were so many strengths. Just a few things. I would edit some of the long quotes down a little bit. Certainly not more than a page on a quote. And it's okay to paraphrase a little bit and say, draw the gems out just so they don't get lost in kind of all the stuff around them. And then I think it would be nice to have a table with the themes and showing how they connect to the research questions and the theoretical foundation, just so for those of us who haven't been reading it and thinking about it as deeply as you have, just so we have a nice synopsis of the main ideas. So again, that your most important and significant findings aren't kind of lost in this really long chapter. But otherwise, I really think you hit that thick, rich description that you want to see in qualitative research.
Thank you. And then Dr. Graves, did you have a comment on chapter 5? Sorry.
I did. So Bakari, in chapter 5, really well done. I learned a lot, contemporary work. Sometimes people like myself, we think ourselves as, I know this, research area, but I'm a lifelong learner. So I appreciate the work you put in to give a contemporary perspective on this in this day and time. So the question I have is this. So is it, from the research you've done, is it really Black culture centers, or is it Black youth wanting more history and knowledge about Black individuals and being together as a community. So what's your thoughts on
Well,
that? I got a couple of them. That's question
right.
one.
So I would say, yes, it is Black cultural centers because Black cultural centers
Okay.
provide the space for that to take place. And I mentioned, I believe in chapter 5 or chapter 6, how Black cultural centers provide a space for students to learn about who they are, develop a healthy racial identity, to coalesce, to experience solidarity at their own pace. Right. So it's not a situation where you're going into a classroom and it's didactic and people are browbeating you, so on and so forth. That's a stereotype about the Black radical tradition, right? But that typically doesn't happen. And the students shared that, of course, throughout the study, that they were seeking space and place or other aspects of campus, and they didn't find it until they, of course, became aware of the MEM Center.
Okay, follow up to that. I'm gonna stay with me with this one. I like your explanation. I agree with you. It gave them that space. So why not? Because it's most people. I think at least 2 people in your study said they really wanted to go to HBCU. One brother was saying he wanted to go, but he just couldn't afford it. And he's like, say he's an introvert. Campus wasn't real big. He felt MEM said help him go. And it was another sister I think said that too. She wanted to go, but she got a full ride. So is it the culture center versus on the PWI setting? So why not just ditch the culture centers and try to have everybody go to HBCUs? Is that realistic?
So I would say it's not realistic. I think the data shows the majority of Black students nowadays attend PWIs, HWIs.
Okay.
Right? And so part of the work that we're looking to do is to make sure that we serve the needs of Black students, irrespective of where they are. Right. So, and how that looks at a Black culture center is different than how that looks at a historically white institution. The second issue, I think, is, and I keep coming back to this, and I think you all noticed this in chapter 6, was the staff. They were the reasons why those students really connected with the center and felt that they could be there, and they developed this sense of accomplishment, this sense of self-worth, this sense of self-appreciation because of the staff. One of the young stated that he was proud of who he was as a person of African descent because he knew the staff were proud of who they were. Right. So doing the work, moving and modeling behavior played a pivotal role in students being able to really, move into this concept that we call freedom as Maroonage at a Black culture center.
Okay. So like you said, it's not realistic. I was gonna see what your thought was. I mean, it's just not enough HBCUs, even if you want to. The data shows it's just not enough. And the price point, everybody wants to do good things and say you want to go to HBCU, but the reality is they don't get as much funding as PWIs or HW, so what can you do? Like it's not realistic to tell someone to take out $200,000 to go to a school that you're never going to be able to pay back because of the loan repayment cuts that judges have said we're not doing that anymore.
Right.
So it's just not realistic. But so I like your thought process. It's about the staff. We want to serve Black youth where they are, whether PWI, wherever. So appreciate your comments on that one.
That reminds me of, it makes me think of Primetime leaving his HBCU for more money, right? Sometimes there are material reasons to go somewhere else. Dr. White, do you have comments on?
Just thinking about the description you gave of Black cultural centers, and this is going to really date me, but Harry Boyd had this work early as a sociologist about the way that churches were free spaces for organization. And I'm thinking about, because he uses the kind of spatial lens in the same way you do, it's a reminder that materiality of space is so important. And I didn't say it before, but I think setting yourself up with Charles Mills, who thinks about space as always delimited racially, I think positions you well to defend the role of these centers as, again, material spaces for collaboration.
Right.
I have a. I don't want to take. I don't know.
No, I just want to say I appreciate that that your sentiment, because, and part of that is due to Dr. Harrison, right? She really pushed me on that in her comments when I made my defense that this was something I really need to hone in on, particularly in terms of the move that we find in terms of anti-DI, the anti-woke agenda, which of course was something that I even asked some of the participants about, many of the participants. And of course, they have very strong views on, of course, anti-woke legislation.
I'm going to follow up with one quick question/observation. One of the things that has struck me about the student activism last spring, well, one thing that struck me is that universities are losing their minds about it. The other thing that struck me is that those encampments are some of the best examples of the DEI agenda in action that we've seen in decades, right? That they are both racially and religiously and in terms of gender and sexuality diverse.
Right.
There have been very, very few incidents of any kind of violence, even verbal violence in the encampments. And I wonder if that, to your Hillel example earlier, that there's something both really important about protecting these centers within universities, but there's also a way in which sort of emergent coalitions are made possible by acting outside of the institutional space. So I wonder, to Dr. Graves' question earlier about, your example of Hillel, is that something we can hope for if we think about a space off campus? Does it have different kind of political potential because it's not imbricated in the institution?
Well, absolutely. I think one example why it's important is because it's needed and necessary. We see the move that we're going, right? Particularly if the presidential election turns out in a way I think many people don't want it to go, this would be a reality. Second, I think it's a move towards the ideological basis of Black consciousness, which of course is Black nationalism. And that concept is rooted in Black people, controlling the institutions and the politics of their community, right? And so there are a number of ramifications from that. But one of the issues is I believe that the centers will be able to actually do much more because it would actually be a space that's unencumbered by the institution, right? And we see that like you mentioned, with these encampments, when these spaces are developed through agency, through ingenuity, and organically, the possibilities and potential for these spaces are numerous.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Okay, anything else on chapter 5, the findings? And I'm looking at Dr. Harrison and believing she probably has written some notes, and it will be, we'll have some notes on your document that you're going to share back. So
yeah, most of what I had to say, I think, is pretty self-explanatory, just writing stuff.
Okay. And then, and we are moving into unfamiliar territory. That is a chapter 6, Laura.
Yeah.
So, which is the discussion, summary, implications. And so just what questions do folks have there?
Well, since you called on me, I'll just go ahead and say a few things. First of all, I just really appreciate how you connected your findings back to the lit review. A lot of people kind of lose steam and don't do that very robustly, but I see you did quite well. I think a lot of these, again, I have a lot of little writing things in here that are self-explanatory, but your implications for students section on page 141 is very short compared to other sections. So I might either incorporate it elsewhere or elaborate, not to give you a whole lot more work to do. But then finally on page 143, you make a really good point about the liminal state of BCCs in the anti-woke era, kind of all the stuff we've just been talking about. It's short. Again, I think it could use a little more elaboration and maybe even connection with the comments Dr. White brought up about the Palestinian activism going on last year. I mean, again, just to really situate this work in the here and now, because I think that's a big strength of it, and to dig a little bit into, one of my other students in my summer class, he wrote about the anti-DEI movement maybe creating some opportunities And his idea was kind of the opposite of like, let's institutionalize diversity stuff so much that it's not really siloed or, in his words, ghettoized in one part of the university. So, maybe we lose the name, but we actually enhance the resources and staffing and money going into this stuff by calling it student success stuff or what, but I thought his idea about maybe, using some of the really unfortunate, I would say anti-Black, anti-diversity thinking to fix some of the problems and some of the complacency and some of the siloing really makes sense. And obviously you're thinking about it in really deep and complicated ways. So I just think there's a little bit more you could say there, but again, not to give you a ton of work because I really appreciate that you did not lose steam in your final chapter and really, really hit the main points pretty well. So most of those ideas are for enhancement, not correction.
Great, thank you. Other comments on the final chapter? Okay, Dr. Graves.
Okay, I agree with the comments about some of the sections being shorter. And and Dr. Hester mentioned like you might want to write a little more. I wasn't gonna say write a little more. I'll leave that to your chair. It's just me more having a good being able to have a conversation with you about some how to situate some of these things in your thought process. So you didn't have access to this data when you was writing your dissertation, Bakari. So it's not like I wouldn't want you to write something, but you just didn't have access to the information. So I'll give an example. Boston University, their Black enrollment went from like 9% to 3% this year because of cutting out all DEI efforts. Harvard's went down even more, that kind of thing. So what does it mean for a Black study center, a cultural center, in anything that would bring together, whatever name you want to use, because different institutions have these different names for, right? Like, how many people do you have to make it legit? What makes it viable if a Black population on the campus goes from just say 9 or 10% to 3%, right? What are the implications for the students? And because you have institutional and student implications, what does that mean with all this going on? Like, we need 15, we need 20. This what money? Like, what's your thought process on that?
Yeah, so I think that's a major issue. One of the things that we tend to find not only with Black culture centers, but even Black studies, right, is the need to consistently represent themselves, right? Almost like you're a musical artist. Guess who's back? And now I'm this person, right? So we tend to find that issue. They have to oftentimes represent themselves in order to, show that they're viable and needed on campus. Another issue I think is prevalent is based on the dwindling enrollment of Black students, there's a high likelihood that those programs and departments and disciplines will be, of course, shuttered, right? So that is an issue in itself. I would argue, and I mentioned this in chapter 5, how the director of the center, of the Center, BAM Center, actually had an informal outreach process where he was actually connecting with students, college-age students in the community, and actually employing them to return to the university. So I would argue some of the work that would be done would be informal rather than formal in nature.
Sounds good. And Bakari, that I agree with you, the informality of it. And I like what you said, just thinking about separating some of these things from the university itself and how can you decouple that. Now I like that, coupled with that answer. I just put a couple of things in the chat for you, Bakari. It's up to your chair. You didn't have access to the information when you was writing your dissertation, and I'm not one to add like, hey man, you do this extra stuff. Your work is your work, and it was really good, and you situated in that. But these thoughts that you're gonna have when you whatever your final job is gonna look like, whatever employment, you're gonna have to think about these if you want to work for a Black Culture Center. Like, okay, what if my enrollment drops to this point? Staffing, how do I staff now? Because the university's not gonna give me this many graduate assistants or something like that. So just start thinking about that. You've always been a critical thinker, so just keep adding to that, the thought process. I'm gonna put a couple other things in the chat when people asking you other questions, but just keep these in mind.
I'm appreciating that you're putting them in the chat too. Thank you.
I will look to, I know it's obviously different, but I was a women's center director in my previous life. And there was a lot of good writing about how women's centers actually started off campus, and they started very much separate from the university for this very reason that, you know, people wanted to be able to do activism. They didn't want the university telling them what to do. And then some people saw it as co-option. Some people saw it as actually, you know, they wanted access to university resources and staffing. And so many of them moved on campus, and there was additional funding and staffing, but much more control about what they could actually do. So there might be some parallels in that literature as well. I'll see if I can dig some of that up.
I was kind of wondering whether foundation boards which are kind of, you know, somewhat independent arms. They're not fully independent, but are sources for funding, and what the relationship, particularly as you were talking, Laura, about that independence thing, there might be a quasi-dependence, you know, like a little bit of a dependence, but it also is a source for funding. And I don't know, but, you know, generally if there would be challenges in raising money at a lot of institutions, or at least many institutions, without the support of like a foundation board or something. But let's see, any other comments, thoughts, questions?
I mean, I'm sucked into thinking about maroonage, and I have just, you know, my hope is that you'll write an article-length piece in a broadly interdisciplinary journal so I can use it when I teach. But I realize that's very selfish. I do think there are a couple things that, you know, for future reading. So here I'm echoing Dr. Graves. I mean, this is not something that you need look at now, but Jasper Puar, it's P-U-A-R, I don't know, she's written about the way assemblage is a better metaphor for identity than intersectionality is. And I think there's something really interesting about the way she thinks about assemblage and the way you're thinking about freedom as maroonage, because the freedom and maroonage is about an ongoing process, right? You never get there. And I think assemblage is her way of saying this thing is constantly unsettled. So concretely, I'm thinking about the way Black Palestinian solidarity has, in the last 15 years, there's like just a burgeoning literature on it. Interestingly, a lot of which cites the Haitian Revolution as a response to circumstances like the Palestinians are facing. Does that make sense to you?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So like, I think there may be all of these ways in which your project is very of the moment, not just in university life, but also, not surprisingly to you, given maybe your own orientations in the activist spaces that I'm trying to think about. So also Sheldon Woolen has this piece called Fugitive Democracy, and it really resonated as I got the full, because in your proposal defense, you talked a little bit about maroonage, but I was still trying to get my head around what that looked like. And now that I got to read the whole dissertation, it made a lot of sense to me. I think his stuff on fugitive democracy is also, it's so resonant with a lot of the ways your interviewees like intuit and then analyze their own relationship to Blackness. So those are just some things that I was thinking of. And if you have a chance to read In the Wake by Christina Sharp, it is such a beautiful book. And it's all about like the distance from slavery, but the way in which we always live in the wake of it, as speaking as a Black woman. So those are just like for fun, you can read those things.
Okay.
I'm saying that really loud in front of Pete so he doesn't put it on the to-do list.
I was writing notes for my own to-do list. Thank you, Julie.
I know. I feel like Scott added to my list. I'm adding to your list. This is just a work meeting.
Me too. I also Googled it. It looks very interesting. Thanks for the reference.
All right. All right. Much has been offered. Thank you. you all. So I think maybe, and I want to give people, I guess, a final chance before we break out into some deliberation. Okay. So Bakari, do you recall at all what we talked through the logistics of this last week? And I think you were going to put the committee in a breakout room, and then I'm going to text you when we're ready to come back.
Okay.
And I'd say you could probably go ahead and stop the recording now as well.
Let's see here. Now we got to find, where do we create the breakout room?
You should have a rooms icon up.
Don't.
Where was it?
Yeah, I don't.
Do you not have it now?
No.
Oh, you don't? Huh. Okay. Well, what do we do here then? I'm looking at, I don't have it either. We have, I don't want to lose your guests either who've come in, because I think it would be, but maybe if you want to bring them back in later, how about if the committee stays on, and then Bakari, you and the guests go ahead and drop off, and then I'll text you, and you can invite people back on after we finish our conversation.
No problem. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and leave.
And Raheem is still with us, I think, unless maybe sometimes people are kind of on and don't, are not close to their machine. Right.
So yes, Raheem, if you, okay, there we go.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to leave, and then you'll text me to bring me back in.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
other schools cut everything? Because we had a vice provost for diversity and inclusion. They haven't filled that position in 2 years, so it just makes me think they're not going to fill that position.
Yeah.
Bakari, should we wait for your friends to come back? Your colleagues? Okay. Well, yeah, as you might guess, it's not going to be bad news. So you probably want some witnesses.
You're a patient and thoughtful person that you would rather them be here than at the news and media.
Wow. Was that Chris? Wow. I
Okay,
figured
Bakari,
the way you ordered him to turn off his camera. Is that what you were going to say, Julie? Like, that's a buddy.
He tried to sneak on, I noticed.
Bakari, you do not look old enough to have served in the military, have friends that are 35 years old. Wow. Oh gosh. Wow.
Well,
Oh, that's awesome.
well, I guess without further ado, and Camilla, you're welcome to turn your camera on if you'd like to join the celebration here. So, yeah, we've got good news. Hello, yeah. So, Bakari, you were successful in your defense. We've got a few little things that we're going to work on together, but the committee is very pleased with your work, and they want you to do more of it because it's so good. That's the that's kind of the catch. So, but anyway, we're really proud of the work you've done. Happy for you, and I'm quite happy to continue this the end game here, the very last stage of your project with you. So, congratulations.
You should make everybody call you Dr. Lumumba now.
Yeah. I have to say it now, Bakari?
Yeah.
I have to say it now? Okay, let me practice. Hold on. Congratulations, Dr. Lumumba. I'm proud of you.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate being part of it, Bakari. And I would like to take a picture before we get off, before anybody peels off. So I'm
trying
gonna
to get out the light. I was sitting in the light over there. That's why I was going.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Not in the light.
Better.
Okay. Yeah, that's better. That's better.
Okay, better. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Here you go. All right. So I actually used the I don't know if that was really a picture, but anyway, I think I can post it for you. But yeah, I got an image anyway. All right. Anything else for anybody in Bakari where I can hang out with you for a little bit and we can talk about what's next?
Just
Well
a big well done. Congratulations. Happy to be part of your process. Looking forward to see what you do in the future.
Take
Yeah.
care. Bye.
And Scott,
Okay.
thanks for joining us. We appreciate having you.
Anytime.
Boy.
If you keep having good students like Bakari, just pick up the phone. I'll be happy to join.
All right.
All right.
Sounds good.
Take care.
All right. Bye. All right. Well,